The words left Daniel Hayes's mouth before his brain could stop them. Maybe I should just marry you. The conference room went dead silent. 20 executives stared. His billionaire CEO, Alexandra Vale, slowly turned her ice blue gaze on him and said, "Promises shouldn't be made lightly, Mr. Hayes." He laughed nervously, assuming she was joking. She wasn't. 24 hours later, he'd discovered that his throwaway comment had just activated a clause that would drag him into a corporate war, a fake marriage, and a choice that would redefine everything he thought he knew about family, power, and survival. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a single father with a 7-year-old daughter and a mountain of student debt accidentally became the most controversial man in American business overnight. And if you're enjoying this story, drop a like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The fluorescent lights in Conference Room B had been buzzing for 3 hours straight, and Daniel Hayes was pretty sure he'd lost feeling in his left foot somewhere around the second PowerPoint presentation. He shifted in his chair, trying not to draw attention as he stretched his ankle beneath the table. Around him, 20 of Vanguard Technology's senior executives sat in various states of exhaustion, their eyes glazed over as the CFO droned on about projected earnings for Q4. Daniel wasn't supposed to be here. As a forensic accountant contracted through a third-party consulting firm, he usually worked in a quiet corner office on the 14th floor, buried in spreadsheets and audit trails that most people found mind-numbingly boring. He loved it. Numbers didn't lie, didn't play politics, and didn't care that he had to leave every day at exactly 5:30 to pick up his daughter from after-school care. But 3 days ago, someone in the C-suite had noticed his name on a routine expense report analysis, seen the anomalies he'd flagged, and apparently decided he needed to be in the room where decisions happened. So here he was, wearing his second-best suit, the good one was at the dry cleaner, trying to look like he belonged among people whose watches cost more than his annual salary. "Mr. Hayes," the voice cut through his thoughts like a blade through silk. Alexandra Vale, CEO of Vanguard Technologies, was looking directly at him from the head of the table. Every head in the room swiveled his direction. Daniel's throat went dry. "Yes, Ms. Vale?" "You've been quiet." Her expression was unreadable, those sharp blue eyes studying him with an intensity that made him feel like a balance sheet being audited. "I'd like to hear your assessment of the Meridian acquisition numbers." He swallowed hard. The Meridian deal was the elephant in the room. A $2, $3 billion acquisition that half the board loved and half thought was financial suicide. Daniel had spent the last week deep in Meridian's books, and what he'd found didn't exactly inspire confidence. "Honestly?" he asked. The corner of her mouth twitched. Might have been amusement, might have been annoyance. "I don't pay for dishonesty, Mr. Hayes." "The publicly reported revenue looks solid," Daniel began, choosing his words carefully. "But when you dig into the footnotes, there are some concerning patterns. Revenue recognition timing that's aggressive at best, questionable at worst. Customer concentration that puts them at serious risk if their top 3 clients walk, and their debt covenants are structured in a way that gives them very little room for error." The room had gone completely silent. The CFO's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "Your recommendation?" Alexandra asked, her tone neutral. Daniel took a breath. This was career suicide, probably. But his daughter Emma's face flashed through his mind, those serious brown eyes that trusted him to always tell the truth, even when it was hard. "Walk away," he said. "Or renegotiate at a significant discount. The assets are real, but we'd be buying their problems along with their patents." For a long moment, Alexandra said nothing. Then she turned to the CFO. "Marcus, pull the offer. Have legal draft a revised proposal at 60% of current terms. If Meridian wants to play games with their numbers, they can accept real market value or find another buyer." Marcus sputtered. "But the board already." "The board," Alexandra interrupted smoothly, "hired me to make decisions that protect shareholder value. Mr. Hayes just potentially saved us from a billion-dollar mistake. Unless you'd like to personally guarantee Meridian's hidden liabilities." Marcus shut his mouth so fast his teeth clicked. Alexandra returned her attention to Daniel. "Thank you for your honesty. It's refreshing." The meeting continued for another excruciating hour, but Daniel barely heard any of it. His heart was still racing from the confrontation. He just contradicted the CFO in front of the entire executive team. He'd probably be escorted out by security before lunch. When Alexandra finally dismissed them, Daniel gathered his laptop and notepad with shaking hands. He was halfway to the door when her voice stopped him. "Mr. Hayes, a moment." Oh God. Here it came, the polite corporate execution. He turned back. The room had emptied except for the two of them. Alexandra stood by the windows, silhouetted against the San Francisco skyline, her charcoal suit perfectly tailored, her dark hair pulled back in a style that probably had a French name he'd never heard of. "I meant what I said," she told him. "That was good work. How long have you been with the consulting firm?" 3 years, Daniel managed. "And before that?" "I was with the SEC for 2 years. Before that, I finished my CPA while working nights at a regional accounting firm." She turned to face him fully, and something in her expression shifted, became almost curious. "That's a hard road. Why leave the SEC?" Daniel hesitated. This wasn't the kind of thing you told a billionaire CEO, but something about the directness of her question, the lack of small talk or corporate performance, made him answer honestly. "My wife died," he said quietly. "Car accident. I had a 6-month-old daughter and a government salary that barely covered daycare. The consulting firm offered better hours and better pay. It wasn't the career I'd planned, but it was the one I needed." Alexandra's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Understanding, maybe. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." "Your daughter, she's how old now?" 7. Emma. He smiled despite himself. "She's currently obsessed with dinosaurs and insists on wearing her lab coat to school every day because she's decided she's going to be a paleontologist." This time, Alexandra definitely smiled, just a small curve at the corner of her mouth. A woman with a plan. "I approve." "She gets that from her mother," Daniel said, then felt his cheeks heat. Why was he still talking? "Anyway, I should have dinner with me." Daniel blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Dinner, tomorrow evening. You and your daughter." Alexandra pulled out her phone, typed something, and Daniel's own phone buzzed. "I'm sending you an address, 7 o'clock. My chef will prepare something child-friendly." "I don't understand. You made an impression today, Mr. Hayes. I'd like to continue the conversation in a less formal setting, and I'm curious to meet a 7-year-old with career goals." She tilted her head slightly. "Unless you have other plans?" Daniel's mind was racing. This was weird, right? CEOs didn't invite random consultants to dinner, especially not with their kids. But he couldn't exactly say no to Alexandra Vale without torching what remained of his career. "No other plans," he heard himself say. "We'll be there." "Excellent." She picked up her tablet from the table. "And Mr. Hayes, the job offer will be in your email by end of day. Vanguard could use someone who prioritizes accuracy over politics. Think about it." She walked past him toward the door, and Daniel caught a faint scent of something expensive. Bergamot, maybe cedar. Then she was gone, heels clicking efficiently down the marble hallway, leaving him standing alone in the conference room wondering what the hell had just happened. The address Alexandra sent led to Pacific Heights, which Daniel should have expected but somehow didn't. He parallel parked his 10-year-old Honda between a Tesla and a Mercedes, feeling acutely aware of the duct tape holding his rear bumper on. "Daddy, is this where the princess lives?" Emma asked from her booster seat in the back, her face pressed against the window as she stared up at the 4-story Victorian mansion. "She's a CEO, not a princess, sweetheart." "CEOs can be princesses," Emma said, with the absolute certainty of a 7-year-old, "and that's definitely a castle." She wasn't entirely wrong. The house was stunning, pristine white exterior, bay windows, intricate woodwork that probably cost more to maintain than Daniel's annual salary. The front garden was small but immaculate, with roses that looked like they'd been placed by an artist rather than grown. Daniel helped Emma out of the car, making sure her dress, the nice one with dinosaurs printed on it, because she'd refused to wear anything else, wasn't wrinkled. His own suit felt shabby by comparison, but it was the best he had. They climbed the steps, and before Daniel could find a doorbell, the door opened. Alexandra Vale stood there in jeans and a simple white sweater, and Daniel nearly didn't recognize her. Without the armor of her business suit, she looked younger, more human. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves past her shoulders, and she was barefoot. "Mr. Hayes," she said, then looked down at Emma. "And you must be the paleontologist." Emma's eyes went wide. "How did you know?" "I have excellent sources." Alexandra stepped aside. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The interior of the house was somehow both grand and comfortable. High ceilings and crown molding, but furniture that looked actually used. Books everywhere. Art that seemed chosen for love rather than investment. Emma immediately spotted a glass case displaying what looked like genuine fossils and gasped. "Are those real?" she whispered, awestruck. "Very real," Alexandra said. "Triassic period, mostly. I went through a paleontology phase myself when I was about your age." "Really?" Emma looked up at her with sudden reverence. "Really? Come on, I'll show you my favorite one before dinner." And just like that, Emma took Alexandra's hand and let herself be led across the foyer, chattering about pterodactyls and stegosauruses. Daniel followed, feeling like he'd stepped into an alternate dimension. The dining room was more casual than he'd expected. A large wooden table set for three, windows overlooking a small garden where the last of the evening light caught on a fountain. The food was already laid out: roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, and something that smelled incredible. "I told Chef to keep it simple," Alexandra said, catching his expression. "I assumed a 7-year-old might not appreciate his usual repertoire." They settled in, and for the first 20 minutes, it was surprisingly normal. Emma dominated the conversation, telling Alexandra about her school project on velociraptors and her teacher, Ms. Patterson, who didn't believe that some dinosaurs had feathers, but Emma had brought in 3 library books to prove it. Alexandra listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking questions that made Emma light up even more. Watching them, Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. Emma had been so quiet since Rachel died, so serious for someone so young. Seeing her this animated reminded him of who she used to be. "Daddy says I ask too many questions," Emma announced, reaching for another roll. "Your daddy is wrong," Alexandra said, glancing at Daniel with a hint of amusement. "Questions are how we learn. Never apologize for curiosity." "See?" Emma told Daniel triumphantly. After dinner, Alexandra showed Emma a collection of old National Geographic magazines, and within 10 minutes, Emma had curled up on the sofa in the library, completely absorbed in an article about a dig site in Mongolia. "She'll be asleep in 20 minutes, Daniel said quietly, watching his daughter's eyes start to droop. "There's a guest room upstairs," Alexandra said. "We can move her when she's out." "We shouldn't impose Mr. Hayes," she gestured toward the hallway. "Walk with me." They ended up in what was clearly her study, a smaller room lined with books, a massive desk covered in papers and screens, a chessboard set up mid-game by the window. Alexandra poured 2 glasses of wine without asking if he wanted one, handed him one, and settled into a leather chair. Daniel sat across from her, nerves returning. This was it. Whatever this dinner had actually been about, he was about to find out. "I need to tell you something," Alexandra said, "and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you respond. Can you do that?" "Okay," Daniel said slowly. She took a sip of wine, her expression carefully neutral. "My grandfather founded Vanguard Technologies in 1982. When he died 15 years ago, he left the majority of his shares in a trust with very specific conditions. One of those conditions is that if I reach my 38th birthday unmarried, control of the company transfers to the board of directors." Daniel's hand tightened on his glass. "Why would he—" "Let me finish." Her voice was firm but not unkind. "My grandfather was brilliant and traditional and absolutely convinced that unmarried women couldn't be trusted with power. He thought I'd marry young, have children, and let my husband run things. When I didn't, he assumed the clause would force me to choose someone suitable." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He didn't anticipate that I'd spend 20 years building this company into what it is and have no interest in a husband as a business partner." "When's your birthday?" Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer from the look on her face. "Tomorrow." The word landed like a stone in still water. "There's more," Alexandra continued. "Victor Langford, he's a majority shareholder in Meridian, the acquisition you told us to walk away from, has been positioning himself for months. He has allies on the board. The moment I lose control, they'll vote him into my position. He'll force through the Meridian deal, strip the valuable assets, and gut everything my grandfather built. Can't you contest the trust? Daniel asked. My lawyers have been fighting it for 5 years. The language is ironclad, and even if we could break it, we couldn't do it before midnight tomorrow. Daniel set down his wine glass, his mind racing. So you need to get married, tonight. Yes. Why are you telling me this? But even as he asked, pieces were clicking into place. The sudden dinner invitation, the interest in Emma, the careful conversation. Oh, I've been through every option, Alexandra said quietly. Every scenario. A marriage of convenience with a business partner. Too many conflicts of interest. Too much risk they'd try to leverage it for control. An old friend, same problem, plus the emotional complications. A stranger from a service. The optics would destroy my credibility with the board, even if it satisfied the technical requirement. She leaned forward, her blue eyes intense. But you, Mr. Hayes, Daniel, you're different. You're smart. You're honest. You have zero interest in my money or my company. You proved that today when you tanked a deal that half my executives wanted pushed through. You're a single father trying to build a stable life for your daughter. You're not looking for power or leverage. You just want to do your job and go home to your kid. You want me to marry you, Daniel said flatly. I want to propose a contract, Alexandra corrected. A legal marriage that satisfies the trust requirement. In exchange, I offer you security. A real position at Vanguard with a salary that means you never have to choose between your daughter's future and your own. A home where Emma can have her own room, a yard, the kind of stability most single parents can only dream of. For how long? The trust requirement is that I be married on my 38th birthday. After that, the clause expires. We could divorce as soon as it's legally feasible. 6 months, perhaps a year, to make it look legitimate. You'd walk away with a settlement that ensures Emma's college is paid for, and then some. Daniel stood up, pacing to the window. Below, the garden was dark except for subtle lighting along the paths. His reflection stared back at him, a tired guy in a cheap suit being offered a way out of every financial stress that had haunted him since Rachel died. This is insane, he said. It's practical. It's fraud. It's strategy. Alexandra rose, coming to stand beside him. I'm not asking you to love me, Daniel. I'm asking you to help me protect something I've spent my entire adult life building. And in return, I'll make sure your daughter has every opportunity you've been working yourself to exhaustion to provide. And if I say no, then I thank you for a lovely dinner, wish you well in your career, and tomorrow I lose the company to a man who'll destroy it for parts. She paused. And you go back to wondering if you'll make rent and Emma's orthodontist appointments in the same month. It was a low blow, and they both knew it. But it was also true. I need to think, Daniel said. Of course, but I need an answer by tomorrow morning. The courthouse opens at 9. We'd need to be there by 9:30 to file and have the ceremony completed before midnight. She pulled out her phone, typed something, and his buzzed again. My personal number, call me by 8 a.m. with your decision. Daniel looked back at the library, where Emma had indeed fallen asleep, curled up with a magazine across her chest. She looked so small, so trusting that he'd take care of her, protect her, give her the life Rachel would have wanted. If I did this, he said slowly, I'd need conditions. Name them. Emma comes first, always. Any decision that affects her, I have final say. And if at any point this arrangement puts her at risk, emotionally, physically, any way, we end it immediately, regardless of the timeline or consequences. Agreed. I want it in writing. Everything, the salary, the settlement, the custody arrangements. I want a lawyer to review it before I sign anything. You'll have it by 7 a.m. Daniel turned to face her fully. Alexandra Vale, Billionaire CEO, was looking at him with something that might have been hope or might have been calculation. Probably both. Why do I feel like I'm making a deal with the devil? He asked. The corner of her mouth quirked up. Because you're smart enough to know that nothing this good comes without a price. She extended her hand. But I promise you this, Daniel Hayes. I will never lie to you, never use your daughter as leverage, and never make you regret trusting me. This is business, but it's honest business. That's more than most people get. He looked at her hand, then at his daughter sleeping in the next room, then back at Alexandra. In his mind, he saw the stack of bills on his kitchen counter. The notice from Emma's school about the field trip she desperately wanted to go on, that cost $300 he didn't have. The conversation he'd had with himself last week about whether he could afford to fix the car's transmission or if he could risk it holding out another 6 months. He didn't shake her hand. Not yet. "I'll call you in the morning," he said. Pushed. Daniel didn't sleep. He got Emma home and into bed, then sat at his kitchen table until 3 a.m., reading through the contract Alexandra's lawyer had emailed at midnight. It was exactly what she'd promised. Clear terms, explicit protections for Emma, a salary that made his eyes water, and a settlement structure that would set them up for life. It was also a legal marriage to a woman he'd spoken to for maybe 3 hours total. At 4 a.m., he made coffee and pulled out the photo album he kept in the bottom drawer. Rachel smiled up at him from a dozen memories: their wedding day, Emma's birth, a random Tuesday morning when they'd made pancakes together. She'd been the planner, the one who always knew what to do. He'd been the numbers guy, content to follow her lead. "What would you tell me to do?" he whispered to her picture. But Rachel couldn't answer, and Emma would wake up in a few hours expecting breakfast and her father to have his life figured out. At 7:45 a.m., Daniel picked up his phone. Alexandra answered on the first ring. "Mr. Hayes? I have one more condition," he said. "Go ahead." "You tell Emma the truth. Not today, not tomorrow, but when she's old enough to understand, you tell her exactly what this was and why. No lies, no fairy tale version. She deserves honesty." There was a long pause. Then, "I agree. Anything else?" Daniel took a deep breath. "Yeah, if we're doing this, stop calling me Mr. Hayes. It's Daniel." "Does that mean yes?" He thought of Emma's face when he told her last month they couldn't afford the dinosaur camp. The way she'd said, "It's okay, Daddy," in that small, brave voice that broke his heart. "Yes," he said. "It means yes." "Meet me at City Hall at 9:30. Bring Emma. I'll have my lawyer there to witness." "And Daniel?" "Yeah?" "Thank you." She sounded genuine. Tired, maybe even scared, but genuine. "I know this isn't easy. Neither is raising a kid on a consultant's salary," Daniel said. "I'll see you in 2 hours." He hung up and sat for a moment in his quiet kitchen, wondering if he'd just made the smartest decision of his life or the biggest mistake. Then Emma's alarm went off down the hall, and there was no more time for doubt. "Daddy?" she called sleepily. "Can we have the dinosaur cereal?" "Yeah, sweetheart," he called back, standing up and pushing the photo album back into its drawer. "We can have the dinosaur cereal." And in a few hours, he'd tell his 7-year-old daughter that they were going to City Hall because Daddy was getting married to the nice lady with the fossils, and then their whole life was going to change. But first, dinosaur cereal, coffee, and finding his good tie. The rest would figure itself out, or it wouldn't, and he'd deal with that when it happened. Either way, there was no turning back now. Emma took the news better than Daniel expected, which somehow made it worse. "So Miss Alexandra is going to be like my new mom?" she asked, around a mouthful of cereal, her legs swinging under the kitchen table. Daniel's coffee suddenly tasted like ash. "Not exactly, sweetheart. She's going to be my wife, which means she'll be your stepmother, but it's complicated." "Is it because you love her?" The question hit him square in the chest. He'd rehearsed this conversation in his head during the drive home last night, tried to figure out how to explain a marriage of convenience to a 7-year-old without lying or telling her more than she needed to know. "I like her very much," he said carefully. "And I think she's going to be good for our family. But grown-up relationships are different than in movies, okay? Sometimes people get married for lots of different reasons." Emma considered this, her face serious in that way that reminded him so much of Rachel it hurt. "Mrs. Patterson says marriage is when two people promise to take care of each other forever." "That's true." "Then it's okay." She returned to her cereal with the matter settled. "Miss Alexandra has dinosaur bones, and she didn't talk to me like I was a baby. I think she'll take care of us good." Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Better than good, Em. That's the plan." Just 2 hours later, they stood on the steps of City Hall, and Daniel's resolve started cracking around the edges. Alexandra was already there, looking perfectly composed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than his car. Next to her stood an older woman with sharp eyes and an expensive briefcase. The lawyer, Daniel assumed. and beside them, a tall man with dark skin and an amused expression that suggested he found this entire situation entertaining. "Daniel," Alexandra said, walking toward them. She crouched down to Emma's level. "Hello again, Emma. Thank you for coming." "Daddy says we're going to be a family now," Emma announced. Something flickered across Alexandra's face. Surprise, maybe guilt, but she recovered quickly. "That's right. Is that okay with you? Are we going to live in the house with the fossil room?" "Yes." "Then it's very okay." Emma reached out and took Alexandra's hand with the casual trust of childhood. "Can I bring my stuffed triceratops? His name is Ralph." "Ralph is absolutely welcome." Alexandra stood, still holding Emma's hand, and met Daniel's eyes. The question there was clear. "Are you sure about this?" Daniel nodded once. No, he wasn't sure, but he was committed. "Shall we?" Alexandra gestured toward the entrance. The ceremony itself took less than 15 minutes. They stood in a small room with fluorescent lighting and government-issue furniture, while a clerk with kind eyes and reading glasses perched on her nose read through the standard vows. Daniel's hands were shaking when he signed the license. Alexandra's signature was steady and precise. "By the power vested in me by the state of California," the clerk said with a smile, "I now pronounce you married. You may kiss if you'd like." Daniel and Alexandra looked at each other. Neither moved. "Or not," the clerk added diplomatically. "Congratulations." Alexandra's lawyer produced a folder and handed it to Daniel. "Employment contract, benefits package, and the private agreement we discussed. Everything's been notarized. Welcome to Vanguard Technologies, Mr. Hayes." "It's still Hayes?" Daniel asked, taking the folder. "I kept Vale," Alexandra said. "You're welcome to keep Hayes, or hyphenate if you prefer. I have no opinion either way. Hayes is fine." He glanced down at Emma, who was examining the marriage license with intense curiosity. "Simple is better." The man who'd been standing quietly to the side stepped forward and extended his hand. "Marcus Chen, Alexandra's head of security. I'll be coordinating the logistics of your move to the residence, also making sure the press doesn't turn this into more of a circus than necessary." "The press?" Daniel's stomach dropped. "You married one of the most powerful women in Silicon Valley," Marcus said, not unkindly. "It's going to be news. We have a statement prepared that will go out this afternoon. Simple, professional, emphasizing that this is a private matter, but expect attention." Daniel looked at Alexandra. "You didn't mention that part. Would it have changed your answer?" He thought about it. "No." Then it didn't seem relevant. She checked her watch. Something slim and elegant that probably cost more than his first car. "I have a board meeting at 2. They're going to be, surprised. Marcus will help you pack up your apartment. Take whatever you want. The house has plenty of room." "Just like that?" Daniel asked. "We get married and you go to a meeting? Would you prefer I stay and help you pack?" There was a hint of challenge in her tone. "No, I just—" He stopped, realizing how absurd this was. He'd married this woman an hour ago and had no idea what happened next. "Never mind." Alexandra's expression softened slightly. "I know this is strange, but we both have jobs to do. Mine is keeping the board from staging a coup. Yours is making sure Emma has a smooth transition. We'll figure out the rest as we go." She crouched down again to face Emma. "I'll see you tonight, okay? Your dad is going to help you pick out which room you want in the new house." "Can I have the one with the window seat?" Emma asked hopefully. "That's the guest room on the 3rd floor. It's yours." Alexandra stood, nodded to Daniel, and walked away with her lawyer, heels clicking on the marble floor. Marcus watched her go, then turned to Daniel with a sympathetic smile. "She's not great at the emotional stuff, but she means well." "Does she?" Daniel heard the bitterness in his own voice and hated it. "Yeah," Marcus said seriously. "She does. Come on, I'll drive you home. We can talk logistics on the way." The logistics, as it turned out, were extensive. Marcus explained that Alexandra's house had a full staff: chef, housekeeper, groundskeeper, and Marcus himself, who lived in the guest house out back. There were security protocols, privacy measures, and a lengthy list of people who would need to be informed about the new living arrangements. "Emma will need to be enrolled in a new school," Marcus said as he navigated his black SUV through downtown traffic. "Alexandra's already reached out to Pacific Heights Prep. They're holding a spot." "That's a private school," Daniel said. Very private. Very good. Emma will get into any college she wants with that on her transcript. Daniel looked back at his daughter, who was playing a game on her tablet, oblivious to how completely her life had just changed. This is happening very fast. That's how Alexandra operates, Marcus said. When she makes a decision, she commits fully. It's why she's successful. It's also why she's terrible at relationships. Speaking from experience, Marcus laughed. I've worked for her for 8 years. In that time, I've seen her go on maybe 3 dates, all disasters. She either intimidates men or they're intimidated by her money. Usually both. What about you? Daniel asked. Security chief seems like a lot for one person. I was special forces before this. Alexandra recruited me when some activist investors were making threats. Turned out I'm good at logistics and reading people. The job evolved. He glanced at Daniel. For what it's worth, I think you're good for her. You don't even know me. I know you walked away from a multi-billion-dollar acquisition because the numbers didn't add up. I know you negotiated a marriage contract with your kids' interests as the primary terms. And I know when Alexandra talks about you, she sounds less alone. Marcus pulled up to Daniel's apartment building. That counts for something. The apartment Daniel had called home for 3 years suddenly looked shabby through Marcus's eyes, peeling paint, a broken buzzer, the faint smell of garbage from the alley behind the building. But it was theirs. He'd carried Emma through that door as a baby. Rachel's presence still lingered in the way the kitchen was organized, the photos on the walls. Take your time, Marcus said, reading his expression. I'll start bringing down boxes from the car. It took 4 hours to pack up their life. Emma wanted to bring everything, every toy, every book, every drawing she'd made in kindergarten. Daniel tried to be practical, but every time he suggested leaving something behind, he saw her face fall and ended up adding it to the keep pile. By the time Marcus loaded the last box into the SUV, the sun was setting and Daniel's back ached. Emma had fallen asleep in her car seat, clutching Ralph the Triceratops. This is it, Daniel said, looking up at the building one last time. You can keep the lease if you want, Marcus offered. Alexandra won't care about the expense. No. Daniel locked the door and pocketed the key. He'd turn it in to the landlord tomorrow. No point hanging on to the past. The drive to Pacific Heights felt like crossing into another world. Marcus used a code to open the gate, and the SUV crunched up a gravel driveway to the mansion Daniel had visited just last night. Except now it wasn't just Alexandra's house. It was home. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman in her 50s with graying hair and a warm smile stood in the doorway. You must be Daniel and Emma. I'm Catherine, the housekeeper. Let me help with those boxes. We can manage, Daniel started. Nonsense. Marcus, grab the heavy ones. Daniel, wake up your daughter, and I'll show you to your rooms. Emma stirred as Daniel unbuckled her seatbelt. Are we there? Yeah, sweetheart, we're there. Catherine led them up the grand staircase to the 3rd floor. The house was even more beautiful in the evening light. Warm wood, soft lighting, art that looked like it belonged in museums. She pushed open a door at the end of the hall, and Emma gasped. The room was perfect. Pale blue walls, white furniture, and a window seat overlooking the garden, exactly as Alexandra had promised. But more than that, there was a bookshelf already filled with books about dinosaurs, a globe on the desk, and a small telescope by the window. Miss Vale had some things delivered this afternoon, Catherine said. She wanted Emma to feel welcome. Emma ran to the bookshelf, touching the spines with reverent fingers. Daddy, look! She got the encyclopedia we saw at the bookstore. Daniel's throat tightened. The encyclopedia set cost $300. He'd told Emma maybe for her birthday. Alexandra had just bought it because she could. Your room is across the hall, Catherine told him. Same floor, so you're close if Emma needs you at night. Daniel's room was smaller but equally thoughtful. A comfortable bed, a desk with a good lamp, built-in bookshelves, and a door that led to a private bathroom. His clothes from the apartment looked ridiculous hanging in the walk-in closet designed for someone with an actual wardrobe. Dinner is at 7, Catherine said. Miss Vale called to say she'll be home by then. If you need anything before, just ask. I'm usually in the kitchen or the main office on the 1st floor. After she left, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything. This morning, he'd been a struggling single father. Now he was married to a billionaire, living in a mansion, with a new job and a daughter who had her own telescope. It didn't feel real. Daddy? Emma appeared in the doorway, still holding Ralph. Is this really ours? Like, we get to stay? Yeah, Em, we get to stay. She ran across the room and threw her arms around him. I miss Mommy, but I think she'd like Miss Alexandra. Daniel held his daughter and blinked back tears. Yeah, sweetheart. I think she would too. At 7 sharp, they heard the front door open. Emma jumped up and ran to the stairs, Daniel following more slowly. Alexandra was in the foyer, setting down her briefcase, looking exhausted. Her perfect composure from this morning had cracked slightly. Her hair was loose, her jacket was gone, and there were shadows under her eyes. How did it go? Daniel asked. She looked up at him, and for a moment her guard was completely down. I'm still CEO. Victor Langford tried to contest the validity of the marriage, claiming it was fraudulent. The board lawyer informed him that unless he had proof, he should shut up or face a defamation lawsuit. So we won? We survived round 1. She noticed Emma watching from behind Daniel. Hello, Emma. Did you find your room? I love it. Emma bounced down the stairs. Thank you for the books and the telescope. You're welcome. Have you looked at the stars yet? Not yet. Will you show me after dinner? Alexandra glanced at Daniel, uncertain. He nodded. I'd like that, she said. Dinner was surreal. They sat at the same table from last night, but now the dynamic had shifted. Catherine served pasta that Emma devoured while asking Alexandra 1,000 questions about the company, the house, whether she'd ever met an astronaut, and if she thought velociraptors could have been domesticated if humans had been around at the time. Alexandra answered each question with the same serious attention she'd probably give a board member, and Daniel found himself relaxing slightly. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could build something functional out of this strange arrangement. After dinner, Alexandra took Emma up to her room and spent 20 minutes helping her set up the telescope, pointing out constellations and explaining how to adjust the focus. Daniel watched from the doorway, seeing his daughter's face light up in a way it hadn't since Rachel died. When Emma finally yawned, Alexandra stood. Bedtime, I think. Will you read me a story? Emma asked. Alexandra looked startled. I don't know any. She has about 50 books, Daniel said, walking to the new bookshelf. Pick your poison. Emma chose a story about a girl who discovered dinosaur eggs in her backyard. Alexandra sat on the edge of the bed and read with the same precise diction she probably used in shareholder meetings. But Emma didn't seem to mind. By the final page, she was already drifting off. Daniel tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and followed Alexandra out into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind them. They stood in the dim corridor, and suddenly Daniel was acutely aware that this woman was his wife. Legally, officially, his wife. Thank you, he said quietly, for the books and the telescope. You didn't have to do that. I wanted her to feel like this is her home, not just a place she's staying. Alexandra leaned against the wall, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. And thank you for going through with this. I know it's not what you wanted. It's not what either of us wanted, Daniel said, but maybe it's what we both needed. She studied him for a long moment. The press statement went out an hour ago. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know we're married. There will be photographers outside the gate, probably reporters calling anyone who's ever met either of us. It's going to get invasive. How invasive? They'll dig into your past, your finances, your wife's death. They'll look for any angle that makes this story more interesting. The best thing we can do is ignore it and maintain consistency. As far as the world is concerned, we met, we fell in love, we got married quickly because life is short. That last part's not even a lie, Daniel said. Alexandra's lips quirked into almost a smile. No, I suppose it isn't. An awkward silence settled between them. Finally, Alexandra pushed off from the wall. I should let you get settled. If you need anything, my room is on the 2nd floor, east wing. Or ask Catherine. She knows where everything is better than I do. Alexandra? She turned back. What happens now? I mean, tomorrow. Do we just go to work and pretend this is normal? We go to work and make it normal, she said. You'll start in the forensic accounting department officially on Monday. Until then, spend time with Emma, get her enrolled at the new school, settle in. I'll handle the corporate side. Separate lives under the same roof, Daniel said. For now. Until we figure out what this is. She hesitated, then added, I'm not good at this, Daniel. The personal stuff. People. If I screw up, tell me. I'll try to fix it. Same, he said. I'm making this up as I go. Then we'll make it up together. She headed for the stairs, then paused. She's a wonderful kid. Your daughter. Rachel did a good job. We both did, Daniel said, his voice rough. Yes, you did. And then she was gone. Footsteps fading down the stairs, leaving Daniel alone in the hallway of a house that was now somehow his. He went back to his room, unpacked a few essentials, and tried to convince himself this was fine. This was smart. This was the right choice for Emma's future. But when he finally lay down in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room, all he could think about was the look on Alexandra's face when Emma had asked her to read a story. Surprise and longing and fear all mixed together, like someone who'd been offered something they desperately wanted but had no idea how to accept. He fell asleep still wearing his wedding ring, a simple gold band Alexandra had provided that morning, and dreamed of Rachel telling him it was okay to move forward, even if the path ahead made no logical sense. The next morning, Daniel woke to sunlight streaming through windows he'd forgotten to cover and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. He checked his phone and immediately regretted it. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, and every major news site had some version of the same headline: Tech billionaire Alexandra Vale marries mystery man in surprise wedding. Mystery man, Daniel muttered. Great. He scrolled through the articles, each one more speculative than the last. Some called it romantic. Some called it suspicious. One particularly vicious gossip blog suggested Daniel was a gold digger who'd seduced the lonely CEO. Another theorized it was a green card marriage, despite both of them being American. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. Mr. Hayes, this is Jennifer Cole from the San Francisco Chronicle. I was hoping you could comment on your relationship with Miss Vale and... He hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Different number. This time he didn't answer. There was a soft knock on his door. Daniel? Alexandra's voice. Can I come in? Yeah? She entered already dressed for work in a charcoal suit, hair perfect, makeup flawless. She looked like she'd slept for 12 hours instead of maybe 4. Her eyes went to his phone, which was buzzing with another incoming call. Turn it off, she said. Marcus is getting you a new number. The old one will be disconnected by noon. How are you so calm about this? Practice? She sat in the chair by the window, crossing her legs. I've been dealing with press attention since I was 25. You learn to compartmentalize. The stories they write aren't about us. They're about the narrative that sells. Our job is to give them nothing to work with. Daniel turned off his phone and tossed it on the bed. What about Emma? She's going to see this stuff eventually. Which is why we need to talk to her first. Explain that people are curious and might say things that aren't true, but that she doesn't need to engage with any of it. Alexandra paused. I've dealt with this my whole life. She shouldn't have to. But she will have to, because of this marriage. Yes. Alexandra met his eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't think through all the implications for her. I should have. The apology caught him off guard. You're doing it again. Doing what? Being honest when it's easier to deflect. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know how to do this, Alexandra. Last week I was a consultant nobody noticed. Now I'm married to you, and apparently the internet has opinions about it. Do you want out? The question was careful, neutral. Because legally we're bound for 6 months minimum to make this look legitimate. But if this is too much, we can... No. The answer came faster than he expected. No, I'm not backing out. I'm just adjusting. Relief flickered across her face. Okay, then here's what we do. Catherine is making breakfast. We eat together as a family. We show Emma that nothing has fundamentally changed. We're still the adults. She's still safe. The world outside doesn't get to determine what happens inside this house. As a family, Daniel repeated. That's what we are now, legally. We might as well act like it. She stood and headed for the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I read some of the articles this morning. The ones calling you a gold digger are ridiculous. The ones calling this romantic are closer to the truth than they know. How do you figure? Alexandra smiled, small and genuine. We both married each other to save something we love. That's more romantic than most marriages start with. She left before he could respond. Breakfast was surprisingly normal. Emma chattered about the dream she'd had about pterodactyls. Catherine served pancakes that were better than anything Daniel had ever made, and Alexandra read the newspaper while drinking coffee that was probably worth more per cup than his old grocery budget. "Emma," Alexandra said, setting down the paper, "we need to talk about something." Emma looked up, syrup on her chin. "Okay. People are very interested in your dad and me getting married. That means reporters might try to talk to you or take pictures or ask questions. If that happens, you don't have to say anything. Just tell them to talk to your dad or me. Understand?" "Like when the kids at school asked me about mommy dying?" Emma asked. Daniel's chest tightened. "Yes, sweetheart. Like that." "Okay. I'll tell them it's private." She returned to her pancakes. "Can I bring Ralph to my new school?" "Absolutely not," Alexandra said, but her tone was gentle. "But we can put him in your backpack so he's nearby." "That works." After breakfast, Marcus appeared with a new phone for Daniel and a tablet for Emma, loaded with educational games. "Also," he said, handing Daniel a folder, "your new employment contract officially starts Monday, but HR needs these forms filled out by Friday. Benefits, emergency contacts, security clearance, standard stuff." Daniel flipped through the papers and stopped at the salary line. "This can't be right." "It's right," Alexandra said, not looking up from her newspaper. "You'll be heading the forensic accounting division. That's the market rate for that position. Market rate is half this. At other companies, maybe, not at Vanguard." She turned a page. "You're good at what you do, Daniel. Get used to being paid accordingly." The rest of the week blurred together. Daniel enrolled Emma at Pacific Heights Prep, where the administrators were professionally courteous and didn't ask questions about the sudden marriage. Emma loved the school immediately. It had a science lab and a library that rivaled the public one near their old apartment. Daniel spent his days organizing the move, reviewing his new employment contract, and trying to wrap his head around the fact that his life had completely transformed in less than a week. At night, the three of them ate dinner together. Alexandra always asked Emma about her day with genuine interest, and Emma responded by treating Alexandra like a fascinating puzzle to be solved, asking questions about everything from quantum physics to why adults drank coffee if it tasted bad. "It's an acquired taste," Alexandra explained. "What does that mean?" "It means sometimes things that are good for you don't taste good at first, but you learn to appreciate them." Emma considered this seriously. "Like Brussels sprouts?" "Exactly like Brussels sprouts. I still hate Brussels sprouts." "Me too," Alexandra admitted, and they shared a conspiratorial smile that made Daniel's heart do something complicated. On Friday night, Alexandra came home early, 6 instead of 8. She found Daniel in the study, going over the employee handbook. "I have something for you," she said, holding out a small box. Daniel opened it. Inside was a watch. Elegant, expensive, definitely more than he'd ever spent on anything besides rent. "You don't have to, Mutz. It's from the company," Alexandra interrupted. "All executives get one when they start. I just had it delivered early." She paused. "There's an engraving." He turned it over. On the back, in simple script, "For Daniel. Trust the numbers. AV." Something in his chest twisted. "Thank you." "You're welcome." She hesitated in the doorway. "There's a Vanguard gala next Saturday. Shareholders, board members, major investors. I need to attend, and it would be beneficial if you came with me, as my husband." "Our first public appearance," Daniel said. "Yes. It'll be formal, probably tedious, definitely full of people asking invasive questions, but it's important for the optics." "What should I say when they ask how we met?" Alexandra came into the room, leaning against the desk. "The truth, mostly. You were consulting at Vanguard. We met at a meeting. We connected over a shared appreciation for honesty and a corporate culture that often lacks it. Things moved quickly. We're private people who'd appreciate respect for our privacy." "That's actually pretty close to the truth." "The best cover stories usually are." She studied him. "You'll need a tuxedo. I'll have my tailor come by tomorrow to do measurements." "I have a suit." "Daniel." Her tone was gentle but firm. "This is a black tie event full of people who judge others based on appearance. I don't care what you wear, but they will. Let me handle this part. You handle Emma's bedtime story. I'll handle the corporate costuming." He wanted to argue, but she was right. This was her world. He was just learning the rules. Okay, he said, but I'm drawing the line at a bow tie. I'll look ridiculous. You'll look distinguished, she corrected. There's a difference. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel found Alexandra on the second-floor terrace, wine glass in hand, staring out at the city lights. Mind if I join you? He asked. She gestured to the chair beside her. Help yourself. Wine's on the table. He poured a glass and sat, the night air cool and clean. Below them, San Francisco glittered like scattered diamonds. Do you ever regret it? He asked. The company, the pressure, all of this. Every day, she said simply, and never. Does that make sense? Yeah, I felt the same way about leaving the SEC. Regretted it because I loved the work. Never regretted it because it meant more time with Emma. Your wife, Rachel, how did she die? The question was direct but not unkind. Daniel took a breath. Drunk driver. She was on her way home from a work conference. Never even saw it coming. The other driver walked away with a broken arm. Rachel died instantly. That's not fair. No, it's not. He took a sip of wine. But fair doesn't matter. What matters is what you do after. I had a 6-month-old who needed her father to keep functioning, so I did. Alexandra was quiet for a moment. Then, my parents died in a plane crash when I was 19. Private jet, bad weather, pilot error. I was at Stanford, got the call between classes. I'm sorry. Me too. She swirled her wine. My grandfather blamed me. Said if I'd been the son he'd wanted instead of a granddaughter, my father wouldn't have been on that plane trying to prove I was worth the family legacy. Spent the next 15 years proving him wrong. Did you? I guess we'll find out. If I can keep the company, I proved him wrong. If I lose it, he was right all along. She smiled, but it was bitter. Healthy, right? My therapist would probably have thoughts, Daniel said. You see a therapist? Did, couldn't afford it anymore. But yeah, after Rachel died. Emma and I both went. She drew pictures of her feelings. I sat in a chair and pretended I had it together. Did it help? Yeah, actually, it did. He looked at her. You should try it sometime. Therapy? Pretending you don't have it together might be a nice change. She laughed, genuine and surprised. You know, you're the first person in years who's talked to me like a regular person instead of a walking corporation. Well, you married me. Might as well get some honesty out of the deal. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking wine and watching the city. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just easy. Hey, Alexandra? Yeah? I think we're going to be okay, Daniel said. This whole weird situation, I think we can make it work. She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. I think so too. And in that moment, sitting on the terrace of a mansion he now lived in, married to a woman he barely knew, Daniel realized something terrifying. This didn't feel fake anymore. It felt like the beginning of something real. The tuxedo fit perfectly, which Daniel found vaguely annoying. He'd hoped for an excuse to skip the gala, but Alexandra's tailor had transformed him into someone who looked like he belonged at a black tie event. He barely recognized himself in the mirror. You look like James Bond, Emma announced from where she sat on his bed, watching him fidget with the cufflinks. James Bond doesn't get nervous before parties, Daniel said. Yes, he does. He just hides it better. She tilted her head. Are you scared? A little, he admitted. These are important people. I don't want to embarrass Alexandra. You won't, Emma said with absolute certainty. You're the smartest person I know. Well, except maybe Miss Alexandra. But you're tied. Daniel smiled despite his nerves. Thanks, kiddo. Now go brush your teeth. Catherine said she'd read you a story while we're gone. Can I come to the party? It's adults only. Very boring. Lots of standing around pretending to care about things like market projections. Emma made a face. Gross. Okay, I'll stay here with Catherine and Ralph. After she left, Daniel took one more look in the mirror. The man staring back looked successful, polished, like someone who married billionaire CEOs. It felt like wearing a costume. He found Alexandra waiting in the foyer and his breath caught. She wore a floor-length gown in midnight blue that somehow made her eyes even more striking. Her hair was swept up, diamond earrings catching the light. She looked like money and power and grace, everything he wasn't. You clean up well, she said, her gaze sweeping over him with professional assessment. You too, Daniel managed, then winced. I mean, you look beautiful. That was supposed to be a compliment. The corner of her mouth quirked up. I'll take it. Ready? No. Perfect. Neither am I. She picked up a small clutch from the hall table. Marcus is driving. The event is at the Fairmont. We'll arrive, make an entrance, circulate for an hour, and leave. Simple. Nothing about tonight is going to be simple, Daniel said. Probably not, Alexandra agreed, but we'll survive it together. The drive to the Fairmont took 20 minutes. Marcus navigated through traffic while Alexandra briefed Daniel on the key players who'd be attending. Victor Langford will be there, she said, her tone carefully neutral. He'll try to get under your skin. Don't let him. What is his angle? He wants to prove our marriage is fake so he can contest the trust. He'll probably insinuate that you're using me, or I'm using you, or both. Stay calm, stay vague, and redirect any personal questions. What if he asks how we met? Tell him the truth. We met at work. You impressed me with your integrity. Things develop naturally from there. She paused. The best lies are wrapped in truth, Daniel. Remember that. This is really starting to feel like a spy movie, he muttered. Welcome to corporate America, Alexandra said dryly. The Fairmont's ballroom was exactly as intimidating as Daniel had feared. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and several hundred people who all looked like they'd been born wearing designer clothing. A string quartet played something classical in the corner. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that were probably tiny works of art. The moment they walked in, conversation stopped. Heads turned. Daniel felt every eye in the room assess him, judge him, try to figure out what he was doing with Alexandra Vale. Smile, Alexandra murmured, her hand resting lightly on his arm. You look like you're walking to your execution. That's how I feel. Fake it. I've been faking confidence since I was 22. It's basically my superpower. A woman in a red gown approached, all bright smile and calculating eyes. Alexandra! Darling, you look stunning. And this must be the mysterious husband. Daniel, this is Margaret Chen, one of our board members. Margaret, my husband, Daniel Hayes. Daniel shook her hand. Nice to meet you. The pleasure is mine, Margaret said, her eyes sharp despite the pleasant tone. I must admit we were all quite surprised by the announcement. Such a whirlwind romance. When you know, Alexandra said smoothly. Indeed. And what is it you do, Daniel? I'm starting in Vanguard's Forensic Accounting Division on Monday, Daniel said, keeping his voice steady. Before that, I was a consultant. How convenient, Margaret murmured. Well, I hope you're settling in well. Marriage to someone like Alexandra must be quite an adjustment. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Daniel felt his jaw tighten, but Alexandra's fingers pressed slightly against his arm. A warning. The adjustment has been easier than expected, he said carefully. Turns out, we have a lot in common. Such as? Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. A daughter who thinks dinosaurs are the pinnacle of evolution, Alexandra interjected. If you'll excuse us, Margaret, I see some people we need to greet. She steered Daniel away before Margaret could respond. Once they were out of earshot, Daniel exhaled. That was a test, he said. Everything tonight is a test. You did fine. Alexandra snagged 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter and handed him one. Margaret has been pushing for Victor to join the board for months. She's fishing for ammunition. Did I give her any? No, you were appropriately vague and mildly defensive, which is exactly what a real husband would be. She took a sip of champagne. Keep doing that. They circulated through the crowd, Alexandra introducing Daniel to what felt like hundreds of people whose names he immediately forgot. He smiled, shook hands, deflected personal questions, and tried not to look as out of his depth as he felt. An older man with silver hair and an expensive watch cornered them near the buffet. Alexandra, wonderful to see you, and you must be Daniel. Robert Whitmore, Alexandra said, her tone cooler than before. Daniel, Robert is one of our largest shareholders. Congratulations on the marriage, Robert said, his tone suggesting he thought no such thing. Quite a surprise for everyone. Sometimes the best things are unexpected, Daniel replied. Indeed, though I'm curious, how long have you two known each other? Long enough, Alexandra said. Forgive me, but the timing seems rather convenient. Your birthday? The trust clause? This sudden marriage? Robert's smile was all teeth, no warmth. It's raised some questions among the shareholders. Daniel felt anger flare hot in his chest, but before he could respond, Alexandra stepped forward, her voice dropping to a tone that could cut glass. Are you questioning my integrity, Robert? I'm questioning the optics. Then let me clarify them for you. I married Daniel because I wanted to, not because I had to. What the trust requires and what I choose are two different things. If you or anyone else has concerns about my leadership, you're welcome to raise them formally. Otherwise, my personal life is none of your business. The temperature around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. Robert's smile faltered. Of course, I meant no offense. Yes, you did. Alexandra set down her champagne glass with deliberate care. But I'll choose to ignore it this once. Enjoy the party, Robert. She walked away, and Daniel followed, his heart pounding. Once they were in a quieter corner near the windows, he let out a breath. That was intense. That was restrained, Alexandra corrected. Robert has been trying to undermine me for 3 years. He wants Victor on the board because Victor promised him preferential treatment on a contract bid. How do you know that? Because I pay attention, and because people like Robert always assume women got where they are through luck or manipulation, never competence. She glanced at him. Are you okay? You look ready to punch someone. I wanted to defend you, Daniel said. But you didn't need it. No, I didn't. But the fact that you wanted to matters. Something softened in her expression. Thank you. Before Daniel could respond, a voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. Well, the happy couple. Daniel turned to see a man in his early 50s, tall and lean, with silver at his temples and eyes like a shark. He knew without being told that this was Victor Langford. Victor, Alexandra said evenly. Enjoying the party? Immensely, though I must say your surprise nuptials stole quite a bit of attention from tonight's actual purpose. Victor's gaze slid to Daniel with barely concealed contempt. Daniel Hayes, correct? The consultant. That's right, Daniel said. Fascinating. From consultant to CEO's husband in what, a week? That must be some kind of record. When Alexandra and I connected, the timeline didn't matter, Daniel said, keeping his voice neutral despite the rage building in his chest. Connected, Victor repeated, amusement coloring his tone. Is that what we're calling it? I'd have used different terminology. Convenient, strategic, desperate, perhaps. Careful, Victor, Alexandra said quietly. You're coming dangerously close to slander. Am I? I'm simply observing that the timing of your marriage coincides remarkably well with the trust deadline. One might even call it miraculous. One might also call it none of your business, Daniel said. Victor laughed, cold and sharp. Oh, I like him, Alexandra. He's got more spine than your usual corporate sycophants. Tell me, Daniel, what did she offer you? A salary, stock options, or just the chance to play house in a Pacific Heights mansion? That's enough. Alexandra's voice had gone deadly calm. You want to question my decisions? Question them. But leave my husband out of your petty power plays. Petty? Victor's smile widened. There's nothing petty about $2.3 billion in company value. When this farce inevitably falls apart, and it will, the board will have grounds to review the trust terms, and then we'll see who ends up running Vanguard. You're assuming it's a farce, Daniel said before he could stop himself. Victor turned his full attention to him. Aren't you going to tell me it's true love, that you swept the Ice Queen off her feet with your consultant charm? I'm going to tell you that what Alexandra and I have is real, whether you believe it or not. And the only person desperate here is you, trying to take something you didn't earn because you couldn't compete legitimately. The words hung in the air. Victor's smile froze. Around them, several nearby conversations had stopped, people pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Interesting, Victor said slowly. You know, I had my team pull your background, Daniel. Single father, modest income, wife died tragically. Quite the sob story. I'm sure Alexandra found it very compelling. You investigated my family? Daniel's voice dropped to something dangerous. Public information, Victor said with a shrug. Your daughter Emma, isn't it? 7 years old? I'm sure she's enjoying the upgrade in lifestyle. Private school, mansion, all the dinosaur books money can buy. Daniel moved before he could think, but Alexandra's hand caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "We're done here," she said, her voice like ice. "Marcus?" As if summoned, Marcus appeared at Alexandra's elbow. He was in a suit instead of his usual casual clothes, but the threat in his posture was unmistakable. "Mr. Langford was just leaving," Alexandra said. Victor held up his hands in mock surrender. "No need for dramatics. I've said what I came to say." He met Daniel's eyes. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Mr. Hayes. Fairy tales always end." He walked away, and Daniel realized his hands were shaking. "I need some air," he said. Alexandra nodded toward the terrace doors. "Go. I'll handle the crowd." Daniel pushed through the doors onto a wide balcony overlooking the city. The cool night air hit his face, but it didn't calm the fury coursing through him. Victor had investigated Emma. Had people looking into Rachel's death, into their lives, all to find ammunition to use against Alexandra. "Bastard," he muttered. "Agreed." He turned to find Alexandra had followed him out. The terrace was empty except for them, the party sounds muted through the glass doors. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have warned you he'd go after your family. You can't predict everything." "I should have predicted that. It's what I would do if I were trying to destabilize an opponent, find their weakness and exploit it." "Is that what I am?" Daniel asked. "Your weakness?" Alexandra leaned against the balcony railing, her gown shimmering in the city lights. "I don't know what you are yet, but you're definitely not weakness." He called you the Ice Queen. People have called me worse. I stopped caring what they thought around the same time I stopped pretending to be what they wanted. Daniel moved to stand beside her. Below, San Francisco spread out like a circuit board, all light and connection. "Back there, when he mentioned Emma, I wanted to hit him," Daniel said quietly. "I've never wanted to hit someone before. Not like that." "Because he threatened your daughter. That's what parents do. We become dangerous when someone goes after our kids." She paused. "Even the ones who aren't biologically ours." He looked at her sharply. "You consider Emma yours?" "I don't know," Alexandra said honestly. "But when he said her name like that, like she was a commodity to be evaluated, I wanted to destroy him. So maybe that's answer enough." They stood in silence for a moment, and then Alexandra laughed. A real laugh, not the polished corporate version. "What?" Daniel asked. "We're terrible at this," she said. "The fake marriage thing. We're supposed to be playing roles. And instead we're actually getting emotionally invested in each other's families and threatening hostile investors. Is that bad?" "I have no idea." She turned to face him, leaning back against the railing. "But it's definitely not what I planned." "What did you plan?" "A transaction. Clean, simple, mutually beneficial. You'd play the husband at events. I'd maintain control of the company, and in 6 months we'd part ways with a handshake and a generous settlement." "And now?" Alexandra looked at him for a long moment, something vulnerable flickering in her expression. "Now Emma draws pictures of the three of us as stick figures and calls it family. Now you defend me to shareholders, and I want to go to war with anyone who threatens your daughter. Now this fake marriage feels less fake every day, and I don't know what to do with that." Daniel's heart was pounding. "Alexandra." "We should go back inside," she said abruptly. "We've been gone too long. People will talk." "Let them talk." "You say that now, but you haven't seen what media scrutiny can do, how it picks apart every moment, every expression, looking for cracks." She straightened her gown with practiced efficiency. "I won't let them find cracks, Daniel. Not in the company, not in this arrangement." "What if the cracks aren't weakness?" Daniel asked. "What if they're just proof that we're human?" "In my world, human is weakness." She moved toward the doors, then stopped. "Thank you for standing up to Victor." "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. He insulted you." "People insult me every day." "Well, they shouldn't." Daniel closed the distance between them. "You're brilliant and terrifying, and you read bedtime stories to my daughter like she's the most important person in the world. You deserve better than people like Victor Langford." Alexandra stared at him, and for a moment her carefully constructed armor cracked completely. She looked young and uncertain, and maybe a little scared. "We should go back," she said again, but she didn't move. Neither did Daniel. They stood there on the terrace, the party continuing without them inside. The city lights spread below, and something fundamental shifted between them. It wasn't love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was real in a way their marriage contract wasn't. "One more minute," Alexandra said quietly. "Take all the time you need." They stayed there until Alexandra's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus checking if everything was okay. Then they went back inside, presented a united front to the crowd, and left exactly 60 minutes after they'd arrived, just as Alexandra had planned. In the car, Daniel finally asked the question that had been building all night. What did Victor mean about Meridian? About $2.3 billion? Alexandra exchanged a glance with Marcus in the rearview mirror. "You remember the acquisition you told us to walk away from?" "Yeah. Victor was the principal investor pushing it through. He'd structured a deal where he'd profit enormously from the transaction, regardless of whether it succeeded long term. When you exposed the problems with Meridian's financials, I pulled the offer. Victor lost a significant amount of money." "So this is revenge," Daniel said. "Partially. But it's also opportunity. If he can get me out and take control of Vanguard, he can force through the acquisition anyway and recoup his losses plus substantial additional profit. At the company's expense." "Exactly." Daniel leaned back in the seat, processing. "So by marrying you, I didn't just help you keep control. I also made an enemy of a very rich, very angry man who's willing to investigate my family to find leverage." "Yes," Alexandra said simply. "I'm sorry. I should have explained all the implications before—" "Stop apologizing," Daniel interrupted. "I went into this with my eyes open. Well, mostly open. But I knew there'd be consequences." He looked at her. "Though I'd appreciate a heads up if there are any other billionaire enemies I should know about. Just Victor for now. The others are merely skeptical and opportunistic." "Great, that's so much better." Marcus pulled up to the mansion, and they found Catherine waiting with a sleeping Emma in her arms. "She insisted on staying awake until you got home," Catherine said softly. "Made it until about 20 minutes ago." Daniel took his daughter carefully, feeling her warmth, the solid reality of her against his chest. She stirred, mumbled something about velociraptors, and went back to sleep. "I'll take her up," he said. He carried Emma to her room, tucked her in with Ralph the Triceratops, and stood for a moment watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, safe, unaware of the corporate warfare swirling around her. He'd do anything to keep her that way. When he came back downstairs, he found Alexandra in the kitchen, still in her gown, making tea. "Want some?" she asked. "Sure." They sat at the kitchen island, the informal one, not the dining room, and drank tea in comfortable silence. Alexandra had taken off her heels and unpinned her hair. She looked more human this way, less like a CEO, and more like someone who just survived a difficult evening. "I start work Monday," Daniel said eventually. "Nervous?" "Terrified. Everyone's going to know I'm your husband. They're going to think I got the job because of that." "You got the job because you're good at it," Alexandra said firmly. "Let them think what they want. Your work will speak for itself. Well, what if I find something? In the books, I mean. Something that implicates someone important. Then you report it to me, and we handle it. That's why I hired you, Daniel. I need someone I can trust to find the problems before they become crises." He studied her over his teacup. "You really think you can trust me? We barely know each other." "I trust your integrity," Alexandra said. "That's more than I can say for most people in my life." She set down her cup. "And we know each other better than you think. I know you check on Emma 3 times a night to make sure she's sleeping okay. You know I work until midnight most nights because I can't turn off my brain. You know I read bedtime stories in the same voice I use for shareholder meetings because I don't know how else to do it. I know you still wear your wedding ring from Rachel on a chain around your neck because you're not ready to let her go completely." Daniel's hand went automatically to his chest, where Rachel's ring hung hidden under his shirt. "How did you—" "I notice things. It's part of being good at what I do." She smiled slightly. "You're not the only one who pays attention, Daniel." "Fair point." He finished his tea. "We're really doing this, aren't we? The job, the marriage, all of it." "Seems like it." "And Victor? The board? The people who think this is fake? We'll deal with them as they come." Alexandra stood, gathering the teacups. "For now, we have a more immediate problem." "What's that?" "Emma's school has a parent-teacher conference next week. Both of us are expected to attend." Daniel laughed despite himself. Corporate warfare I can handle. Parent-teacher conferences still make me sweat. Then we'll sweat together, Alexandra said. That's what partners do. Partners, Daniel repeated. Is that what we are? Alexandra looked at him for a long moment. I don't know what we are yet, but we're figuring it out. She left the kitchen, her gown rustling against the floor, and Daniel sat alone for a while longer. Outside, the city was quiet, the night deep and still. Somewhere out there, Victor Langford was probably plotting his next move. The board members were probably gossiping about the marriage. The press was probably writing tomorrow's headlines. But inside this house, Emma was sleeping peacefully in her room with the window seat. Alexandra was somewhere upstairs, probably already back at work despite the late hour. And Daniel was sitting in a kitchen that was starting to feel like home, wearing a tuxedo that fit perfectly, married to a woman who was nothing like he'd expected and everything he was starting to need. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts. The truth always comes out eventually. VL. Daniel deleted it without responding. Victor wanted to rattle him, to make him doubt. But the thing about being a forensic accountant was that Daniel knew how to follow trails, find patterns, uncover truth buried in numbers. And if Victor Langford was sending threatening texts, it meant he was worried. Which meant Daniel and Alexandra were doing something right. He turned off the kitchen lights and headed upstairs, already thinking about Monday, about starting his new position, about what he might find in Vanguard's financial records if he looked close enough. Because if there was one thing Daniel Hayes knew how to do, it was find the truth in the numbers. And he had a feeling Vanguard Technologies was about to reveal some very interesting truths indeed. Monday morning arrived with the kind of pressure Daniel hadn't felt since his SEC days. He stood in front of his closet, second-guessing every shirt, every tie, until Emma appeared in his doorway already dressed in her new school uniform. You look nervous, she observed. I am nervous. Why? You're good at numbers. That's what Miss Alexandra said. Daniel smiled despite his anxiety. When did she say that? Yesterday when you were at the store. She told me you were going to help keep the company safe, like a superhero but with spreadsheets instead of a cape. Something warm expanded in his chest. She said that? Yep. She also said if anyone at work is mean to you, to tell her and she'll fire them. Emma giggled. I don't think she was joking. Probably not, Daniel agreed. He selected a navy tie and checked his reflection one final time. How do I look? Like someone who belongs in a big office, Emma said seriously. Mom would be proud. The words hit him unexpectedly hard. He crouched down to Emma's level. You think so? I know so. She always said you were the smartest person she ever met, and the nicest. Emma hugged him tight. Don't be scared, Daddy. You've got this. 20 minutes later, Daniel walked into Vanguard Technologies as an employee for the first time. The building was even more imposing from this perspective. 42 floors of glass and steel housing some of the brightest minds in technology. Security waved him through with his new badge, and he took the elevator to the 28th floor where the Forensic Accounting Division resided. His new office was corner-positioned with windows overlooking the city. It was easily 3 times the size of his old cubicle at the consulting firm. The desk was real wood, the chair ergonomic, and there was a coffee maker on the credenza that looked like it cost more than his old monthly rent. A woman in her mid-30s with red hair and sharp green eyes knocked on his open door. Daniel Hayes? That's me. Jennifer Park, senior analyst. Welcome to the team. She came in and shook his hand with a grip that meant business. We've been short-staffed for months, so honestly, I don't care how you got this job. If you can actually do the work, you'll have my support. Daniel appreciated the directness. Fair enough. What's the current workload look like? Disaster, mostly. We've got 3 active investigations into expense fraud, a vendor audit that's 6 months behind schedule, and Marcus from Executive Security sent down a request to review all transactions over $5 million from the last quarter. She handed him a thick folder. That last one is yours. He specifically asked for you. Daniel flipped through the folder, his trained eye already catching patterns. Large transfers to shell companies, vendor payments that didn't match standard contracts, consulting fees that seemed excessive. This is going to take weeks to untangle properly, he said. You've got 2. Ms. Vale, Wants preliminary findings before the quarterly board meeting. Jennifer paused. Look, I know the situation is awkward. You being married to the CEO, but if you're actually good at this, we need you. The company's been hemorrhaging money through fraudulent transactions for at least a year, and we haven't had the manpower to track it all down. A year? Daniel looked up sharply. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 50 million, possibly more. Daniel's jaw tightened. $50 million in fraud, and Alexandra had been fighting to keep control while someone systematically robbed the company blind. Who knows about this? Me, you, Marcus, and Ms. Vale. She's been keeping it quiet to avoid spooking whoever's behind it. Jennifer met his eyes. She said you're the only person she trusts to find the truth without leaking it to the board prematurely. No pressure, then. Welcome to Vanguard, Jennifer said with a wry smile. Coffee's in the break room. Try not to have a mental breakdown before lunch. We've got a pool going on how long new hires last. She left, and Daniel sat down at his new desk, opened his laptop, and dove into the numbers. Within an hour, he'd forgotten to be nervous. The spreadsheets made sense in a way corporate politics never would. Money left trails, and trails could be followed. By noon, he'd identified 3 shell companies that appeared in multiple transactions. By 3, he'd traced 2 of them back to a single offshore account. By 5:30, when he absolutely had to leave to pick up Emma, he'd found a pattern that made his blood run cold. Someone with executive-level access had been systematically siphoning funds for at least 18 months, routing them through increasingly complex channels to hide the theft. And the timing of the largest transfers coincided exactly with major company decisions. Someone on the inside was selling corporate intelligence and stealing millions in the process. Daniel saved his work, locked his computer, and headed home with a stomach full of dread. This wasn't simple fraud. This was corporate espionage at the highest level. He found Alexandra already home, which was unusual. She was in her study, still in work clothes but with her shoes off, reading through a stack of contracts with the kind of focus that meant she was stressed. "You're home early," Daniel said from the doorway. She looked up, and some of the tension in her face eased. Board member called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. Wanted to give me a heads up that they're questioning the Meridian decision. She set down the contract. "How was your first day?" "Productive and concerning." He came into the room, closed the door behind him. "The fraud investigation Marcus asked me to run? It's worse than anyone thought." Alexandra's expression sharpened. "How much worse?" "At least 50 million over 18 months, possibly more, but that's not the worst part." Daniel pulled out his phone, brought up the notes he'd made. "The transactions correlate with major corporate decisions. Someone with access to executive-level information has been timing the theft to coincide with announcements that would affect stock prices, vendor contracts, acquisition talks." "Inside trading combined with embezzlement," Alexandra said quietly. "Exactly. And whoever it is has been careful. The amounts are just under the threshold that would trigger automatic review. The shell companies are layered behind legitimate-looking LLCs. If I hadn't been specifically looking for patterns, it could have gone unnoticed for years." Alexandra stood, pacing to the window. "Do you have any idea who?" "Not yet, but the access level required narrows it down to maybe 20 people total, C-suite executives, senior VPs, board members with administrative privileges." "Victor," Alexandra said immediately. "Maybe, but I need more evidence before we can accuse anyone, especially someone that powerful." Daniel hesitated. "There's something else. One of the shell companies received a large payment 2 days after our wedding was announced, $5 million, coded as a consulting fee." Their eyes met, and Daniel saw the same realization dawn in Alexandra's expression that had hit him that afternoon. "Someone's paying for information about us," she said, "or paying someone to destabilize the marriage. Either way, this isn't just about money anymore. This is about removing you from power." Alexandra returned to her desk, her movements controlled, but Daniel could see the fury beneath the surface. "We need to move carefully. If Victor or whoever's behind this realizes we're investigating, they'll either destroy evidence or accelerate whatever they're planning." "Agreed. I'll keep digging, but quietly." In the meantime, Daniel's phone buzzed. Emma's school. "Hold on, this is Emma's teacher." He answered, and Mrs. Patterson's warm voice came through. Mr. Hayes, I'm so sorry to bother you. Emma's fine, but there was a small incident today I wanted to discuss. Could you and Ms. Vale come in tomorrow for that conference we scheduled? What kind of incident? Nothing serious, but it involves some questions the other children were asking about your recent marriage. Emma handled it beautifully, but I think it would be good to talk in person. Daniel's stomach sank. We'll be there. 3 o'clock? Perfect. See you then. He hung up and found Alexandra watching him with concern. Emma? Kids at school asking about the marriage. The teacher wants to meet with both of us tomorrow. Of course they are, Alexandra said tiredly. I should have anticipated this. 7-year-olds don't exactly understand corporate marriages of convenience. Neither do most adults, Daniel pointed out. We'll handle it. Together. Something softened in Alexandra's expression. Together. I'm still getting used to that word actually meaning something. Before Daniel could respond, Emma's voice echoed up the stairs. Daddy! Miss Alexandra! I'm home! They went downstairs to find Emma with Catherine, already launching into a detailed account of her day that involved a science experiment with vinegar and baking soda that had apparently gone explosively well. Over dinner, Emma chattered about her new friends, the library that had an entire section on prehistoric life, and the art teacher who let her paint a mural of a T-Rex. She seemed happy, adjusted, like the transition to a new school and new life hadn't fazed her at all. But when Catherine cleared the dishes and Alexandra went to make a phone call, Emma's cheerful facade cracked slightly. Daddy, she said quietly, can I ask you something? Always, sweetheart. Are you and Miss Alexandra really married? Like, for real? Daniel's heart squeezed. He'd known this question was coming, but he still wasn't prepared for it. We are legally married, yes. Why do you ask? Because Sophie, she's in my class, she said her parents said you only married Miss Alexandra for her money. And then Jacob said maybe Miss Alexandra married you because she was lonely. And I said they were both wrong, but I didn't know how to explain why. Daniel pulled Emma onto his lap, the way he used to when she was smaller. What Sophie and Jacob's parents think doesn't matter, Em. What matters is that Miss Alexandra and I made a choice to become a family with you. And that choice was real, even if the reasons were complicated. Do you love her? The question hung in the air. Daniel thought about Alexandra reading bedtime stories, defending him at the gala, trusting him with the company's darkest secrets, looking at Emma like she was something precious. I care about her very much, he said carefully. Love is complicated, and sometimes it takes time to grow. But I can tell you that I respect her, I trust her, and I want this to work. Does that make sense? Emma nodded against his chest. I think I love her. Is that okay? Oh, sweetheart. Daniel kissed the top of her head. That's more than okay. That's wonderful. Good. Because I told Sophie that Miss Alexandra is the best stepmom ever, and if anyone says mean things about our family, I'll report them to Mrs. Patterson. Daniel laughed despite the heaviness in his chest. That's my girl, fighting battles with proper administrative channels. Later, after Emma was asleep, Daniel found Alexandra back in her study, but this time she was just sitting in the dark, staring out at the city lights. You okay? He asked softly. Emma asked you if we're really married, didn't she? How did you? I heard the tail end when I came back from my call. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Alexandra turned to face him, and in the dim light from the city, she looked vulnerable. What did you tell her? The truth, that we made a choice to become a family, and that choice was real even if the circumstances were unusual. He came into the room, sat in the chair across from her. She also said she thinks she loves you. Alexandra's breath caught. She did? Yeah, and she told her classmates you're the best stepmom ever. I don't know how to be a stepmom, Alexandra said quietly. I barely know how to be a person outside of work. What if I screw this up? What if I hurt her? You won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Daniel leaned forward. Because you care enough to worry about it. Bad parents don't stay awake at night wondering if they're good enough. They just assume they are. Alexandra was quiet for a long moment. Then, my mother died when I was 19. I never got to ask her advice about relationships, about family, about any of this. My grandfather certainly never offered guidance beyond marry someone suitable and produce heirs. I've been making up the rules as I go for so long that I don't know what normal even looks like. Normal is overrated, Daniel said. Emma and I are doing okay, and we're about as far from normal as it gets. A widowed single father who married his CEO to save her company and moved into a mansion, Alexandra said with a faint smile. Yes, that's definitely not a normal Tuesday. Exactly. So we'll figure out our own version of normal, the three of us. The word settled between them, comfortable and terrifying at once. They sat in companionable silence until Alexandra's phone buzzed with what was probably the 50th email of the evening. The board meeting is at 9 tomorrow, she said, checking the message. They're going to push hard on the Meridian decision. Robert Whitmore has been making calls, building a coalition to question my judgment. Because you saved the company from a bad acquisition? Because I contradicted their pre-approved narrative. They'd already decided the acquisition was brilliant, and I made them look foolish. She set down her phone. Corporate boards are like high school cliques with better lawyers. Bruise their ego, and they'll find a way to make you pay. What do you need from me? Keep investigating. If we can prove someone on the board is involved in the fraud, it'll shift the power dynamic entirely. She met his eyes. But be careful, Daniel. If they realize what you're looking for, you could become a target. I've been threatened by Victor Langford and investigated for gold digging. I think I can handle corporate fraud suspects. This is different. People who steal $50 million don't stop at threatening text messages. They destroy careers, reputations, sometimes lives. The seriousness in her tone made Daniel's skin prickle. Are you saying I'm in actual danger? I'm saying we both are. This stopped being a simple contract marriage the moment you found that pattern in the transactions. Alexandra stood, moved to where he sat, and surprised him by taking his hands. I need you to promise me something. What? If this gets dangerous, if you find evidence that puts you or Emma at risk, you tell me immediately. No heroics, no trying to handle it alone. We're partners in this now, remember? Her hands were warm in his, her eyes intense and worried. Daniel realized with a start that she was genuinely afraid for him. I promise, he said, but the same goes for you. No shouldering everything alone because you're used to being solitary. If someone threatens you, I need to know. Deal. She squeezed his hands once, then released them, stepping back into her professional space. Now go get some sleep. We have a parent-teacher conference to survive tomorrow, and Mrs. Patterson strikes me as someone who doesn't tolerate unprepared parents. The next afternoon, Daniel and Alexandra sat in child-sized chairs across from Mrs. Patterson's desk, feeling exactly like students called to the principal's office. Mrs. Patterson was in her 50s with kind eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen every parenting challenge imaginable and remained unimpressed by all of them. Thank you both for coming, she said, folding her hands on her desk. First, let me say that Emma is a delight. She's bright, curious, respectful, and has already made friends. You're doing something very right. Daniel felt some of the tension ease. Thank you. However, Mrs. Patterson continued, I wanted to discuss the questions she's been facing from other students about your family situation. Some of the parents have been, let's say, interested in the details of your marriage, and their children are bringing those conversations to school. What kind of questions? Alexandra asked, her tone carefully neutral. Whether it's real, whether Mr. Hayes married you for money, whether Emma is being used as part of some corporate strategy. Mrs. Patterson's expression showed what she thought of those theories. 7-year-olds don't understand nuance, so they repeat what they hear at home. Emma has handled it with remarkable maturity, but I wanted you to be aware. How do we help her? Daniel asked. Keep doing what you're doing. She feels secure, loved, confident in her place in your family. That's what matters. Mrs. Patterson smiled slightly. Though I will say, when Sophie Martinez suggested Emma's new situation was suspicious, Emma informed her that her father is a forensic accountant who specializes in finding the truth, and if anyone was suspicious, it was Sophie's mother's new Botox regimen. Alexandra made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. She said that? Verbatim. I had to give her a gentle talk about kindness. But between you and me, Sophie's mother has been spreading half the rumors about your family, so I didn't try very hard to sound stern. Daniel couldn't help but smile. That's my kid. She's a fighter, Mrs. Patterson agreed. Just make sure she knows she doesn't have to fight these battles alone. You're both here for her, and so am I. They talked for another 20 minutes about Emma's academic progress, her social adjustment, and the upcoming science fair she was already planning for. By the time they left, Daniel felt infinitely better about Emma's transition. In the car, Alexandra was quiet until they were halfway home. Then she said, "She defended us, with Botox commentary. That's Emma. Tactical honesty delivered with precision. She gets that from you. The honesty, maybe. The tactical delivery is all her mother. Rachel could shut down an argument with a single, well-placed observation." Daniel glanced at Alexandra. "Emma really does think of you as family, you know. This isn't just convenient proximity for her." "I know," Alexandra said softly. "That's what terrifies me. I don't know how to be what she needs." "You already are. You show up, you pay attention, you treat her like a person instead of a child to be managed. That's more than a lot of parents do." They pulled into the driveway, and Alexandra turned to face him in the dimming light. "When this started, I thought I could keep everything compartmentalized. Business arrangement here, personal life there, nothing overlapping. But Emma draws pictures of us as a family. You defend me to hostile investors. I threaten people who mention your daughter's name. We're not compartmentalized anymore." "No," Daniel agreed. "We're not. So what do? We keep going. We figure it out. His phone rang. Jennifer Park. He answered on speaker. "Daniel, you need to see this." Her voice was tight with urgency. "I stayed late running the analysis you asked for. I found another shell company, but this one's different. The account holder is listed." "Who?" "Marcus Chen, Alexandra's head of security." The words hit like a physical blow. Daniel met Alexandra's eyes and saw his own shock reflected there. "Are you sure?" Alexandra asked, her voice deadly calm. "Transaction records don't lie," Jennifer said. "He's been receiving payments for the last 8 months. Smaller amounts than the other shells, but consistent. I'm sending you the documentation now." Alexandra's phone buzzed with the incoming files. She opened them, scrolled through, and her face went pale. "Thank you, Jennifer," Daniel said. "Don't discuss this with anyone else. We'll handle it from here." He hung up and watched Alexandra process the betrayal. Marcus, who'd driven them to their wedding, who'd helped them move, who'd been her head of security for 8 years. "It could be a mistake," Daniel said, though he didn't believe it. "It's not." Alexandra's voice was flat. "The amounts match consulting fees Marcus would have access to approve. The timing aligns with security protocol updates he would have known about." She looked at Daniel, and her eyes were full of fury and hurt. "He's been selling my security vulnerabilities to whoever's trying to take me down." "We don't know that for certain." "Yes, we do." She pulled out her phone, started to dial, then stopped. "If I confront him now, he'll run or destroy evidence. We need to be smart about this." "We need proof that connects him to Victor or whoever's orchestrating this," Daniel said. "And we need to make sure Emma's safe. If Marcus has been compromised, he lives on the property." Alexandra's face had gone from pale to ashen. "He has access to the house, to security systems, to everything." They looked at each other, the same realization crystallizing. The man they'd trusted to protect them might be the biggest threat of all. "We go home," Daniel said. "We act normal. We don't let him know we suspect anything. And tomorrow, we find enough evidence to bury him and whoever he's working with." Alexandra nodded, her jaw set. "And if he's working with Victor? Then we expose them both. But first we keep Emma safe." They drove the rest of the way in tense silence. When they reached the house, Marcus was waiting by the garage exactly as he always did, with his easy smile and casual competence. "How was the parent-teacher conference?" he asked. "Fine," Alexandra said, her voice giving nothing away. "Emma's doing well." "Good to hear. I've got the updated security schedule for you to review whenever you have time." "Tomorrow's fine," she said, walking past him toward the house. "I've got calls to make tonight." Daniel followed, his skin crawling with the knowledge that the man they'd trusted might be planning their downfall. Inside, Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table with Catherine supervising. She looked up when they entered, her face brightening. "Did Mrs. Patterson tell you about the science fair?" she asked excitedly. "I'm going to build a model of plate tectonics." Can we go to the science store this weekend? Absolutely, Daniel said, forcing normalcy into his voice. Whatever you need. He helped Emma with her homework while Alexandra disappeared into her study, probably reviewing the evidence Jennifer had sent. By the time Emma went to bed, Daniel's nerves were stretched to breaking. He found Alexandra in the library, a glass of whiskey in her hand, staring at her laptop screen with an expression that could cut glass. I've been going through Marcus's personnel file, she said without looking up. He came highly recommended. Impeccable credentials. 15 years of military and private security experience. I trusted him completely. People betray trust for a lot of reasons, Daniel said quietly. Money, ideology, blackmail, or because they never deserved it in the first place. She finally looked at him. I need to know how deep this goes. If Marcus has been compromised, then our entire security infrastructure is vulnerable. The house, the company, Emma's school, everything. Then we bring in someone from outside, someone Marcus doesn't know about. I'll make some calls. Alexandra set down her whiskey. But Daniel, if this connects to Victor, if he's been planning this since before we even got married, then we were always going to end up here, Daniel finished, fighting for the company, for our family, for everything we're trying to build. Some contract marriage this turned out to be. Despite everything, Daniel smiled. Yeah, it's definitely more complicated than advertised. They sat together in the library, making plans and backup plans, preparing for a confrontation neither of them wanted but both knew was coming. Outside, Marcus Chen finished his security rounds, completely unaware that his carefully constructed deception was about to collapse. And somewhere in the city, Victor Langford was probably celebrating what he thought was his impending victory, not realizing that Daniel Hayes had just found the thread that would unravel his entire scheme. The game had changed. The stakes were higher than corporate control now. This was about family, trust, and survival. And Daniel was done playing defense. The calls Alexandra made that night brought a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, to the house at 6 the next morning. She was former FBI, now running her own security consulting firm, and she moved through the mansion with the kind of efficiency that made Daniel understand why Alexandra trusted her. Your entire system has back doors, Sarah said after 2 hours of analysis, her laptop open on the kitchen table while Emma ate breakfast upstairs with Catherine. Someone with administrative access could monitor communications, track movements, disable alarms. If Marcus wanted to compromise this location, he could do it remotely without ever stepping foot inside. Can you lock him out? Alexandra asked. Already done. I've also installed independent monitoring on all entry points that feeds directly to my team. He'll notice eventually, but by then we'll know if he tries to access anything he shouldn't. Sarah looked between them. But I have to ask, are you sure about this? Marcus Chen has an impeccable record. If you're wrong about him, we're not wrong, Daniel said, showing her the transaction records Jennifer had compiled. The money trail is clear. Sarah studied the documents, her expression darkening. This is sophisticated. Whoever's behind this has resources and patience. They've been building this for over a year. Victor Langford, Alexandra said. He has both. Then you need to move carefully. Men like that don't lose gracefully. Sarah closed her laptop. I'll have my team maintain surveillance. If Marcus makes contact with anyone suspicious, we'll know. After Sarah left, Daniel and Alexandra sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee that had gone cold, the weight of what they were about to do settling over them. The board meeting is in 3 hours, Alexandra said quietly. Robert Whitmore is going to question the Meridian decision, probably with Victor feeding him ammunition. If Marcus realizes we've locked him out of the security system before then, he won't, Daniel interrupted. Sarah's good, and we have bigger problems. I need to present the fraud findings to you officially before the board meeting so you have ammunition of your own. Can you tie it to Victor definitively? Not yet, but I can prove someone on the executive level has been systematically stealing from the company. That alone should shift the board's focus. Alexandra nodded, then checked her watch. I need to get ready. You should too. The board will expect both of us there. Both of us? You're head of forensic accounting now. This is your investigation. You present the findings. She met his eyes. And Daniel? Don't hold back. Whatever you found, they need to hear it. 2 hours later, Daniel stood in Vanguard's main boardroom wearing his best suit and trying not to visibly sweat. The room was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, a table that could seat 30, and original artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses. The board members filed in one by one. Robert Whitmore with his silver hair and predatory smile, Margaret Chen looking coolly professional, Victor Langford, who wasn't technically a board member but had been invited as a concerned major shareholder, took a seat near the head of the table with the confidence of someone who thought he'd already won. Alexandra sat at the head of the table, composed and controlled, every inch the CEO. She caught Daniel's eye once, a brief moment of connection, then turned her attention to the room. "Let's begin," she said. "Robert, I believe you called this meeting?" Robert stood, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Thank you, Alexandra. I'll be direct. Several board members have expressed concern about your recent decision to withdraw from the Meridian acquisition. It was a deal we'd spent months negotiating, with projected returns that would have significantly benefited our shareholders." "Projected returns based on fraudulent financial reporting," Daniel said before he could stop himself. Every head in the room turned toward him. Robert's smile froze. "I'm sorry," Robert said slowly. "Who are you again?" "Daniel Hayes, head of forensic accounting. And before you ask, yes, I'm also Alexandra's husband. But the numbers I'm about to show you don't care about our relationship status." He connected his laptop to the room's display system. Spreadsheets filled the screen. Transaction records, corporate filings, audit trails that painted a damning picture. "Meridian Technologies has been cooking their books for at least 2 years, Daniel continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Revenue recognition that violates GAAP standards, liabilities buried in footnotes, and customer contracts that don't exist outside of their accounting system. If Vanguard had acquired them at the proposed price, we would have been liable for hundreds of millions in hidden debt." "That's a serious accusation," Victor said, his voice cold. "Do you have proof?" "Every transaction is documented here." Daniel pulled up another screen. "But that's not why I'm presenting today. While investigating the Meridian situation, I found something more concerning. For the last 18 months, someone has been systematically embezzling from Vanguard Technologies. Approximately $53 million has been routed through shell companies and offshore accounts." The room erupted. Board members talking over each other, demanding answers, looking at Alexandra like she'd personally betrayed them. "How is this possible?" Margaret demanded. "We have audits, controls." "The person doing this had executive-level access," Daniel said, raising his voice to be heard. "They knew how to stay just under the threshold for automatic review. They timed transactions to coincide with major announcements when attention would be elsewhere. And they've been patient, building this scheme slowly enough that it wouldn't trigger immediate red flags." "Do you know who?" Robert asked, and for the first time he looked genuinely shaken rather than performatively concerned. Daniel glanced at Alexandra. She gave him a slight nod. "I have evidence connecting several shell companies to specific individuals," he said carefully. "But I'm still working to establish the complete chain of custody. What I can tell you is that the theft correlates with strategic company information that only a select few would have access to." "This is convenient," Victor said, standing. His face had gone red. "Your wife faces a hostile board questioning her judgment, and suddenly her husband discovers massive fraud that conveniently makes her look like a victim rather than the problem." "The math doesn't care about convenience," Daniel shot back. "Every transaction is documented. Every shell company has a paper trail. If you don't believe me, hire an independent forensic firm to verify. The numbers will tell the same story." "Then name names," Victor pressed. "If you have evidence, present it. Otherwise, this is just a distraction." Daniel was about to respond when the boardroom door opened. Sarah Chen walked in, followed by 2 men in FBI windbreakers. "Victor Langford," one of the agents said, "we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." The room went dead silent. Victor's face drained of color. "This is absurd," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "On what evidence?" "On the evidence Mr. Hayes compiled and turned over to federal investigators 3 days ago," the agent said, "along with additional documentation provided by Marcus Chen as part of a cooperation agreement." Daniel felt Alexandra stiffen beside him. Marcus. The man who'd betrayed them had apparently betrayed Victor too. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victor said, but he was already backing toward the door. We have transaction records showing you received over $40 million in stolen funds from Vanguard Technologies, the second agent said, pulling out handcuffs. We also have recordings of conversations between you and Marcus Chen discussing the timing of thefts to coincide with efforts to destabilize Ms. Vale's leadership. You have the right to remain silent. The rest of the Miranda warning faded into background noise as agents led Victor from the room in handcuffs. Daniel watched, his mind racing. Marcus had cooperated? When? How? As if summoning him by thought alone, Marcus appeared in the doorway. He looked exhausted, older than Daniel had ever seen him, and when his eyes met Alexandra's, there was nothing but regret there. I need to explain, he said quietly. Make it quick, Alexandra said, her voice like ice. Marcus stepped fully into the room. The remaining board members watched with the fascination of people witnessing a car crash. Victor approached me 8 months ago, Marcus began. He had evidence of something I did when I was in the service, something illegal that I'd buried. He said if I didn't help him, he'd destroy my career and probably send me to prison. So I gave him access to security protocols, helped him time the thefts, fed him information about board members he could manipulate. Why should we believe anything you say? Robert demanded. Because 3 days ago, Daniel asked me to review some security footage that didn't make sense, Marcus said, looking at Daniel. Timestamps that had been altered, access logs that showed me places I'd never been. I realized Victor wasn't just using me for information. He was setting me up to take the fall for everything. So you went to the FBI? Alexandra said. I went to Sarah Chen first. She's the one who introduced me to the agents. I gave them everything. Recordings of my conversations with Victor, documentation of how he structured the shell companies, proof that he was behind the Meridian deal specifically to saddle Vanguard with debt that would force the board to remove you. Marcus's jaw tightened. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I betrayed your trust. But I couldn't let him destroy everything you built because I was too much of a coward to face my own past. Alexandra was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, walked around the table, and stopped directly in front of Marcus. You're fired, she said simply. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. If I ever see you again, it will be in a courtroom. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. I understand. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, you two are good together. The marriage might have started as strategy, but it became something real. Don't let this mess make you forget that. Then he was gone, escorted out by the same agents who'd arrested Victor. The boardroom was silent. Finally, Robert cleared his throat. Well, he said weakly, this has been quite a meeting. Is there anything else? Alexandra asked, her tone making it clear there better not be. I think we're good, Margaret said, and several other board members nodded quickly. Then we're adjourned. Daniel will provide full documentation of the fraud investigation to the audit committee. Any questions should be directed to him. Alexandra gathered her materials with crisp efficiency. Oh, and Robert, the next time you want to question my judgment, make sure you're not taking talking points from someone who's actively robbing the company. It's a bad look. She walked out and Daniel followed, leaving the board members to process what had just happened. They made it to Alexandra's office before either of them spoke. That was, Daniel started. Insane, Alexandra finished. She sank into her chair, the adrenaline that had kept her upright through the meeting suddenly draining away. Marcus was working with the FBI. I didn't see that coming. Neither did I, Daniel admitted. I thought we'd have to build the case piece by piece. Instead, Victor got arrested in the middle of a board meeting, Marcus confessed to everything, and you just became a corporate legend by exposing a $50 million fraud scheme in your first week. Alexandra laughed, slightly hysterical. This is the strangest month of my life. You married me on a dare and we're fighting corporate espionage. Strange is kind of our baseline now. It wasn't a dare, Alexandra said quietly. I asked you to marry me because I trusted you. Because even though we barely knew each other, I believed you'd do the right thing. And you have. Every single time. Daniel crossed the room, sat on the edge of her desk. So what happens now? Victor's arrested, Marcus is gone, the board knows about the fraud. Is it over? The legal parts will take months. The company will recover. The board will eventually accept that I made the right call on Meridian. Alexandra looked up at him. But us? I have no idea what happens with us. The contract said 6 months minimum, Daniel said. We're barely 1 month in. The contract was written when this was supposed to be simple. Nothing about this is simple anymore. No, Daniel agreed. It's not. They sat in silence, the question neither of them wanted to ask hanging between them. The marriage had served its purpose. Alexandra had maintained control of the company. The threat was neutralized. By all logical measures, they could start planning their exit strategy, except neither of them wanted to. Emma drew another picture, Alexandra said suddenly. She showed it to me this morning before school. What was it? The three of us at the science fair next month. You helping her with her volcano, me judging the other projects, and apparently looking very scientific. Alexandra's smile was soft. She asked me if I thought her mom would be proud of her project. Daniel's throat tightened. What did you say? I said her mom would be proud of the amazing person she's becoming, and that I'm honored to be part of helping her get there. Alexandra met his eyes. I meant it, Daniel. I know I'm not Rachel. I know I'll never replace her. But being in Emma's life, being in both of your lives, it's the first time I've felt like something other than a CEO in longer than I can remember. You're not just in our lives, Daniel said. You're part of our family. That happened somewhere between the courthouse wedding and you reading bedtime stories and threatening Victor Langford for mentioning Emma's name. So what do we do? Alexandra asked. The contract expires in 5 months. We could stay married for appearances, then quietly divorce when the timing's better. Or we don't, Daniel interrupted. Alexandra stared at him. What? The contract was a starting point, not an ending. Yeah, we got married for the wrong reasons by most people's standards. But we've built something real in the last month. Emma loves you, you love her, and I... He stopped, surprised by how hard it was to say the words. I think I'm falling in love with you. The confession hung in the air between them. Alexandra's eyes went wide, vulnerable in a way Daniel had never seen. You don't have to say that, she whispered. The contract doesn't require... Forget the contract, Daniel said. I'm not talking about legal obligations. I'm talking about the fact that I look forward to coming home to you, that I trust you with my daughter's future, that when Victor threatened you, I wanted to destroy him, not because of the company, but because he hurt someone I care about. Daniel, I'm not saying we need to figure out forever right now, but I am saying that I don't want to plan our exit when we've barely started figuring out what this could be. He reached out, took her hand. What do you want, Alexandra? Not what's strategic or politically smart. What do you actually want? She was quiet for so long Daniel thought he'd miscalculated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I want this to be real. I want to come home to dinner with Emma and arguments about bedtime and your terrible jokes that make her laugh. I want someone who sees me as a person instead of a corporation. I want... Her voice cracked. I want a family. With you. Daniel pulled her up from her chair into his arms and kissed her. It was their first real kiss. Not the awkward peck at the courthouse, but something genuine and desperate and full of all the things they'd been too scared to say out loud. When they finally broke apart, Alexandra was crying. I don't cry, she said, wiping at her eyes. I haven't cried in 15 years. Then you're due, Daniel said gently. It's been a hard month. The hardest. And the best. She laughed through her tears. How is that possible? Because we're really good at the impossible, apparently. We turned a contract into a marriage, a desperate arrangement into a family. What's a little emotional vulnerability compared to that? Alexandra kissed him again, softer this time. We should probably go get Emma from school. Tell her that the bad people are gone and we're safe now. And that we're staying together, Daniel added. Not because of a contract, but because we choose to. Will she understand the difference? She's 7 and already smarter than both of us combined. She'll figure it out. They left the office hand in hand, which caused exactly 3 people to drop their coffee cups in the hallway. Daniel couldn't bring himself to care. Let them gossip. Let them wonder. The truth was simpler than any rumor. He'd married Alexandra Vale to save her company and secure his daughter's future. Somewhere along the way, he'd fallen in love with her brilliant mind, her terrible bedtime story delivery, and the way she looked at Emma like she'd been given something precious she didn't quite know how to hold. That evening, they picked Emma up from school together. She ran to the car, backpack bouncing, and threw herself at both of them. "Guess what?" she said breathlessly. "Mrs. Patterson said my plate tectonics proposal was the best she's ever seen. Can we start building this weekend?" "Absolutely," Alexandra said. "But first, we need to talk to you about something." Emma's face grew serious. "Is it bad?" "No, sweetheart," Daniel said. "It's good. The people who are trying to cause problems for our family, they can't hurt us anymore. We're safe. Because you're really smart and Miss Alexandra is really powerful?" "Because we worked together," Alexandra said. "Your dad found the truth, and I made sure the right people listened." Emma considered this. "Like a team?" "Exactly like a team," Daniel confirmed. "Good," Emma said decisively. "Because Sophie Martinez said her mom said you guys would probably get divorced soon, and I told her she was wrong because we're a real family now." Daniel and Alexandra exchanged glances. "You were right," Alexandra said softly. "We are a real family. Not because of paperwork or contracts, but because we choose to be." "I know," Emma said, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. "Can we get pizza for dinner? Real families have pizza night." They got pizza. They built the foundation for Emma's science fair project in the living room, which resulted in baking soda everywhere and Catherine making exasperated noises about the carpet. They watched a documentary about the Cretaceous period that Emma had seen at least 5 times, but insisted they needed to watch together as a family activity. Later, after Emma was asleep, Daniel and Alexandra sat on the terrace where they'd first started having real conversations. "The board is going to announce the arrest tomorrow," Alexandra said. "There will be media coverage, probably another round of intense scrutiny. Will you be okay with that? With you beside me?" "Yeah, I think I will." She leaned against him, and Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "The contract said 6 months, but I'm thinking longer term now." "How long term? Until Emma graduates college? Until we're too old to remember why we started this in the first place?" Alexandra smiled. "I'm not good at traditional romance, Daniel. I can't promise poetry or grand gestures. But I can promise honesty, partnership, and showing up every day to figure this out together." "That sounds perfect," Daniel said. "Though I reserve the right to make terrible jokes and dad humor. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." They sat in comfortable silence until Alexandra's phone buzzed. She checked it, then laughed. "What?" Daniel asked. Marcus's cooperation helped the FBI identify 3 other companies where Victor had similar schemes running. They're estimating total fraud across all his operations at over $200 million. She showed him the news alert. "He's going to prison for a very long time." "Good," Daniel said simply. "The article mentions us. Says you're the forensic accountant who cracked the case and that our marriage, quote, proved to be more than just a corporate strategy." Alexandra raised an eyebrow. "They have no idea how right they are." 3 months later, Daniel stood in the gymnasium of Pacific Heights Prep, watching Emma present her plate tectonics project to a panel of very serious judges. Her model showed continental drift through different geological eras, complete with working volcanoes that she'd insisted on making erupt realistically. "And this is how the supercontinent Pangaea broke apart over millions of years," Emma explained with the confidence of someone who'd practiced this presentation approximately 100 times. "The tectonic plates are still moving today, just very slowly, like how families change and grow but stay connected." She'd added that last part herself without telling Daniel or Alexandra. The judges smiled. When the presentation ended, Emma ran over to where they stood at the back of the gym. "How did I do?" she asked anxiously. "You were perfect," Alexandra said, crouching down to Emma's level. "Though I'm pretty sure you just compared plate tectonics to family dynamics, which wasn't in the rehearsal." "I added it this morning," Emma admitted. "Mrs. Patterson says the best presentations connect science to real life. And we're real life now, right?" "Very real," Daniel confirmed, ruffling her hair. Emma beamed, then ran off to see her friends who were presenting projects on ecosystems and the water cycle. "She's going to win," Alexandra said confidently. "You're biased." "I'm correct. There's a difference." They walked through the science fair, admiring projects and making appropriate impressed noises at experiments involving growing crystals and building simple machines. Other parents recognized them, some friendly, some curious, a few still skeptical. Daniel had learned to ignore the whispers. On the way home, Emma fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement. Alexandra drove while Daniel handled the evening emails that never seemed to stop. "The divorce lawyers sent final documents today," Alexandra said casually. Daniel looked up sharply. "What?" "For the official dissolution of our marriage contract. They wanted to make sure we had everything in order when the 6-month mark hit next week." She glanced at him, a slight smile playing at her lips. "I told them to shred it." "You did?" "I did. Then I asked my personal attorney to draft something else instead." She pulled an envelope from her purse, handed it to him. "Open it." Inside was a single piece of paper. Daniel scanned it quickly, then read it again more slowly. It was an adoption petition. For Emma, with Alexandra listed as the petitioning parent. "I know she has a mother," Alexandra said quietly. "I know I can never replace Rachel. But legally, if something happened to you, I'd have no rights to Emma. She'd go to your sister in Ohio, and I'd just be the woman who was married to her dad for a while. I don't want that. I want to be her parent, Daniel. Officially, if you'll let me." Daniel couldn't speak. He looked back at the document, at Alexandra's precise signature on the bottom, at the space left for his. "You don't have to decide now," Alexandra said quickly. "It's a big step, and if you think it's too soon or..." "Yes," Daniel managed. "Yes, absolutely yes." Alexandra's breath caught. "Really? You've been her parent since the second week we knew you. This just makes it official." He pulled out a pen, signed his name next to hers. "Emma's going to lose her mind when we tell her. We'll tell her after the science fair results come in. One major life event at a time." 2 days later, Emma's plate tectonics project won first place in the 3rd grade division. She accepted her ribbon with a speech about how science helps us understand how things connect and change, which the judges found charming and Daniel found suspiciously insightful for a 7-year-old. That night, over celebratory ice cream, they told her about the adoption. Emma stared at the papers, then at Alexandra, then burst into tears. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked, alarmed. "These are happy tears," Emma insisted, throwing her arms around Alexandra. "Now you're my mom for real. Not just pretend or because of marriage. For real." Alexandra hugged her back, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "For real, sweetheart. Always." Later, after Emma was finally asleep, still wearing her first-place ribbon, Daniel and Alexandra ended up back on their terrace, which had become their spot for important conversations. 6 months ago, I was desperate and alone, about to lose everything I'd built, Alexandra said. Now I have a daughter, a husband who actually likes me, and a company that's stronger than ever because we rooted out the corruption. Well, 6 months ago, I was barely keeping my head above water financially, wondering how I'd pay for Emma's future, Daniel added. Now I have a job I love, a partner who challenges me, and a family that chose each other instead of settling for biology. We're really bad at traditional, aren't we? The worst, Daniel agreed, but we're really good at us. Alexandra leaned over and kissed him, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, she was smiling. I never thanked you properly, she said. For what? For making that stupid joke in the conference room that started all this. Maybe I should just marry you. Worst pickup line in history, but it gave me an idea when I desperately needed one. It wasn't a pickup line, it was exhaustion and poor impulse control. It was fate, Alexandra corrected. Or luck, or whatever you want to call the thing that brings people together when they need each other most. I call it Tuesday, Daniel said. Just another weird Tuesday that changed everything. They sat together watching the city lights, planning Emma's upcoming birthday party, discussing the latest development at Vanguard, and debating whether dinosaur-themed decorations were too childish for an 8-year-old's party. She's going to want the T-Rex cake, Alexandra predicted. Obviously. The question is whether we also do the fossil dig activity or if that's overkill. With Emma? There's no such thing as overkill when it comes to paleontology. Fair point. 6 months after a desperate contract marriage in a courthouse, Daniel Hayes sat on a terrace in Pacific Heights with his brilliant, complicated, wonderful wife, planning their daughter's birthday party and feeling more at home than he had since Rachel died. The marriage had started as a strategy, a transaction, a desperate move to save a company and secure a future. It had become something infinitely better. It had become real. Somewhere in the house, Emma slept peacefully, her first-place ribbon on her nightstand next to a photo of the three of them at the science fair. In the morning, she'd wake up and ask what they were doing today, and they'd figure it out together, the way families do. No contract required, no strategic planning necessary. Just three people who'd chosen each other and decided that was enough. "Hey, Alexandra," Daniel said quietly. "Yeah? I love you." She turned to him, her eyes bright in the city lights, and smiled the real smile that she only ever gave him and Emma. "I love you too," she said simply. "Now and for as long as you'll have me." "Forever then," Daniel said, give or take. Forever sounds perfect. And it was.